What if your entire future depended on the next 3 hours? A famous lawyer named Virginia arrives at a luxury hotel to meet a wealthy businessman named Adrian. At the time, Adrian is the prime suspect in a murder investigation and has only managed to avoid prison by posting bail. Virginia has been brought in at the request of his defense attorney, who believes her expertise may be the key to saving the case. Their meeting was originally scheduled for later that night, but Virginia arrives early because time is running out. A new witness has emerged, and their testimony could seriously damage Adrian's defense. To make matters worse, Adrian's previous statement is filled with inconsistencies and unanswered questions. Known as a lawyer who has never lost a case, Virginia quickly realizes she needs the complete truth. Although Adrian is hesitant to trust her, they have only 180 minutes to rebuild his defense from the ground up. With no other option left, Adrian finally agrees to tell her everything that happened just a few days earlier. Adrian and Laura were having an affair, and someone was blackmailing them for 100,000 euros. Virginia immediately questions why that particular hotel was chosen, since it is around 200 miles from Adrian's home. Adrian says the blackmailer chose the place, not him. Virginia asks whether he knows anything about the hotel, but Adrian brushes that aside because, to him, the real issue is much bigger. Laura was killed there, and now he is the one being accused of murdering her. According to Adrian, he waited in the hotel room with Laura for 2 hours. Then he received a message from the blackmailer, sent using Laura's phone. The message said that everything would be revealed in room 715 of Hotel Bella Vista. The moment they read it, they realized it had all been a trap, so they decided to leave. Adrian had already brought a suitcase full of the money the blackmailer demanded, but before they could get out, someone attacked him and knocked him unconscious. Sometime later, Adrian woke up and found Laura dead. By then, people and police officers had already gathered outside the room because someone had heard screams coming from inside. Adrian did not open the door, so a hotel employee used a spare key. Even then, the door would not fully open because it was chained from the inside. The police forced their way in and found Adrian as the only person still alive in the room.
¡Policía! Hay alguien en la habitación.
From that moment on, he became the prime suspect in Laura's murder. That is why Adrian now desperately needs Virginia to prove that he did not kill Laura. Of course, Adrian told the police that he was not the murderer. The problem is that the room had been chained from the inside. On top of that, it was the middle of a brutal winter, and the hotel had removed the window handles so the windows could not be opened from inside the room. The police checked everything to see whether the window could somehow have been used anyway, but they found no footprints outside. They also examined the fireplace shaft, but there was no sign that anyone had passed through it either. So if Adrian is telling the truth, then Laura's killer somehow vanished without leaving a single trace. And for the killer to escape, that person would have had to enter first. The only people who got the hotel room key from the front desk were Adrian and Laura themselves. Adrian cannot explain any of it, but he insists the whole thing was a setup meant to frame him for Laura's murder. The only problem is, he has no idea who would want to do that to him, and that is where it begins. This is the invisible guest. However, because of this case, Adrian's wife leaves him. Now the focus is clear. If Adrian truly did not kill Laura, then they need to find out who was blackmailing him in the first place. Virginia senses that Adrian is still hiding something, but he denies it. She explains that throughout her career, she has dealt with two types of clients. The first type accepts their situation and is willing to cooperate, even when it is uncomfortable. The second type believes they are smarter than their own lawyer, and in her eyes, Adrian clearly belongs to the second type. Then Virginia shows him a newspaper article about a missing young man. She points out that they have already wasted 10 minutes, and it is time for Adrian to start telling the truth. Finally, Adrian admits that everything began 3 months earlier. He told his wife he was going on a business trip to Paris, but in reality, he was spending time with Laura. They woke up late that day and rushed to head back. The GPS told Adrian to turn right, but he chose to go left because it seemed faster. Even though he was having an affair, Adrian still felt guilty because he loved his wife and child. At the same time, Laura, who also had a husband, saw their relationship as something exciting. Adrian was torn between guilt and desire, unable to end the affair. While driving, a deer suddenly crossed the road, causing Adrian's car to crash into another vehicle.
Estoy bien.
Adrian and Laura were unharmed. When they checked the other car, they found a young man named Daniel inside. He had not been wearing a seatbelt, so the impact had been severe. Adrian wanted to call the police, but Laura stopped him. Laura quickly argued that it was Daniel's fault for not wearing a seatbelt and for being distracted by his phone. No one had witnessed the accident. Daniel was already dead, and according to her, they still had their entire future ahead of them. At first, they planned to leave the scene, but then Adrian's car suddenly would not start. Panic set in, especially when they heard another car approaching. Thinking fast, Laura took documents from Daniel's car and created a story to make it look like she and Adrian were the victims of the accident. When a passerby stopped to help, Laura calmly explained that they had been in a crash and were just exchanging insurance details. At that same moment, they heard Daniel's phone ringing inside his car. Laura quickly rejected the call, and since the passerby suspected nothing, he continued on his way. Even so, they feared that the driver might come back, so they had to act quickly. They moved Daniel's body into the trunk of his car. Then they split up. Adrian would get rid of Daniel's body, while Laura would stay behind and wait for help with Adrian's car. Adrian drives away with Daniel's body, determined to make it disappear. Along the way, his mind keeps replaying everything that led to this moment. If only he had not had the affair. If only he had followed the GPS. If only they had not woken up late. He realizes that one small decision after another has brought him here. Eventually, he reaches a lake that can be accessed by car. His plan is simple: to push Daniel's car, with the body still inside, into the water and erase all evidence. Just as he is about to do it, he hears a noise coming from the forest. He looks around and sees nothing but a deer watching him from a distance. He ignores it. Then, without hesitation, he pushes the car forward until it sinks into the lake. In his mind, he convinces himself that it was all just an accident. Daniel is already dead, and he and Laura still have their lives ahead of them. To him, there was no other choice. Afterward, Adrian calls Laura and asks her to pick him up. When they meet again in the car, Laura describes how chaotic everything felt while she was alone. And now the story shifts to what Laura experienced during that time. Laura tries to call for a tow truck, but she cannot give her location because she has no idea where she is. All she can do is wait. Not long after, a man stops to help. His name is Thomas, and he asks about her condition. Laura explains that she almost hit a deer, and now her car will not start. It turns out that Thomas is a mechanic, so he offers to take a look. After checking the car, he realizes he does not have the tools needed to fix it on the spot. Instead, he suggests bringing the car back to his house. With no better option, Laura agrees. On the way there, they make small talk. From their conversation, it becomes clear that Laura lives in Barcelona. Thomas talks about his wife, who used to be a lecturer. Because of her illness, they moved here to live a quieter life. When Thomas asks about Laura's job, she lies and says she owns a bookstore, even though she is actually a photographer. Thomas mentions that he also enjoys books, something he picked up from his wife, and that they first met in a theater group. Laura continues to hide the truth, even giving a false name and calling herself Raquel. Not long after they arrive at Thomas's house, he introduces her to his wife, Elvira. While Thomas works on the car, Elvira invites Laura inside to wait. Laura takes a moment to clean herself up, then looks around the house. From the photos, it is clear that Thomas and Elvira were once deeply involved in theater. Elvira offers her a warm drink and notices the wedding ring on Laura's finger, asking if she has children. Laura denies it. Elvira then shares that she has a son. At that moment, a phone call comes in, and Elvira answers it. It is her son's girlfriend, saying that he never arrived where he was supposed to go. As Laura looks at a photograph in the house, the truth hits her all at once. The son Elvira is talking about is Daniel, the same young man she and Adrian just ran over. The realization overwhelms her with guilt and panic. At the same time, Thomas finishes repairing the car. They kindly invite Laura to stay for dinner, but she refuses. All she wants now is to leave as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Elvira tells Thomas that Daniel never arrived at his destination. She begins to feel that something is wrong, but Thomas tries to reassure her, thinking that Daniel may have simply changed his plans. Elvira decides to call her son, unaware that Laura is still carrying Daniel's phone in her pocket. When the phone starts ringing, both Elvira and Thomas hear it. Laura quickly hides it inside the sofa, trying not to draw attention. But the moment they notice something unusual, they begin to feel uneasy because Daniel would never leave his phone behind. Sensing the tension, Laura rushes to leave. Before driving off, she adjusts the seat to fit her position, then quickly heads out to pick up Adrian. Even though both of them are overwhelmed with guilt, they convince themselves that the only thing they can do now is move forward and continue their lives. Adrian starts by destroying his car completely, making sure there is no trace left. After that, he and Laura agree to end their relationship for good. Adrian then goes to the police and reports his car is stolen. The next day, Adrian goes back to work as if nothing has happened. His company is preparing to expand into the global market, and he cannot afford any distractions. After work, he returns home and repeats the same story to his wife that he gave to the police. Adrian is not a cold-blooded killer, and the guilt continues to weigh on him. On the news, he sees reports about Daniel's disappearance, with search efforts underway. Thomas and Elvira appear on screen, still unaware that the people who helped them are responsible for their son's fate. Weeks pass, and the police begin to suspect Adrian. They discover signs of a collision between two cars not far from Daniel's home, yet there was never any official report of an accident. Thomas comes forward and explains that he encountered a woman with a broken-down car at the scene. Since Laura never gave her real name, Thomas cannot identify her. However, the car was registered under Adrian's name, which leads the police to question him. Adrian is shown a sketch of Laura, but he denies ever knowing her. Since Adrian had already destroyed his car and reported it stolen, he claims that Laura might have been the one who took it. The police lack solid evidence, and Adrian cannot prove that he was in Paris when Daniel disappeared. Still, Thomas's statement is seen as potentially biased since he is Daniel's father. With the help of his lawyer, Adrian manages to avoid being charged. Later, when Adrian is alone with his lawyer, he is asked directly whether he had anything to do with Daniel's disappearance. Adrian insists that he was not in Paris at the time, but avoids giving a clear answer. What matters most to him is protecting his reputation. He wants his name completely removed from the case. Back in the present, Virginia already knows that despite promising to cut ties, Adrian secretly contacted Laura again. At first, he denies it, but eventually admits the truth. He explains that after Laura became a wanted person, he could no longer find peace of mind. At the same time, news reports suggest that Daniel may have faked his own death. It is revealed that he worked at a bank and was suspected of stealing 50,000 euros. Adrian admits that he used a public phone to contact Laura, asking how she managed to make it look like Daniel had run away. Not long after that, the two of them meet again for the first time in weeks. Laura reveals that before Adrian disposed of Daniel's body, she had taken Daniel's wallet. It turns out her husband works at the same bank as Daniel, but in a much higher position. Using her husband's access, Laura was able to make it look like Daniel had stolen 50,000 euros from the bank. She tells Adrian that he does not need to do anything because everything is already under control. If Adrian tries to report her to the police, he will only expose himself as well. Laura even has photos proving that Adrian was not in Paris when Daniel disappeared. Virginia finds this hard to believe, since it seems unlikely that Laura could manipulate a bank system without being detected. Adrian explains that Laura used to work at the same bank before becoming a photographer, and with how much technology has advanced, it is possible her husband also helped her. Adrian continues his story. After meeting Laura again, his business keeps growing. He even receives an award as Businessman of the Year. His wife stands by his side through all of it, completely unaware that her husband is both unfaithful and responsible for a death. During the event, a journalist approaches Adrian and insists on speaking with him. Adrian agrees, only to realize that the man is Thomas. Even though they have never officially met, Adrian recognizes him from the news, but chooses not to show it. Thomas introduces himself as Daniel's father. At this point, Daniel is no longer considered dead, but instead a fugitive accused of theft. Thomas is certain his son is not a thief and that something is wrong. In his mind, Daniel is already dead and the truth has been covered up. Thomas explains that when Adrian was previously questioned by the police, he and Elvira were present. Elvira told the police that Daniel had been using his phone shortly before Thomas encountered Laura. That means it would make no sense for Daniel's phone to suddenly end up in their home. They believe Laura brought it there, but they have no way to prove it. This leads them to suspect that Laura is connected to Daniel's disappearance. Thomas is also convinced that Laura was not acting alone. Before leaving, she adjusted the driver's seat, which suggests the car was not hers. People do not lie without a reason, and Thomas believes Laura was lying to protect herself. He even borrows Adrian's lighter, using it as a way to confirm his suspicion. When Thomas repaired the car earlier, he noticed that same lighter inside it, which leads him to believe Adrian was the one helping Laura. Adrian maintains that he was in Paris when Daniel disappeared. However, the only proof he has is a plane ticket and a hotel payment, both of which are weak evidence. At that point, Thomas and Elvira still trust the police. But a few days later, they see the news suggesting that Daniel may have run away after stealing money from the bank. That is when Thomas realizes something is not right. Elvira is already battling cancer, and her condition worsens after hearing the worst possible outcome about her son. Even so, Thomas refuses to give up. The only lead he has is Adrian, since the car Laura used belonged to him. From that moment on, Thomas begins quietly following Adrian, determined to uncover the truth. Thomas realizes that if Adrian ever admits he was not in Paris when Daniel disappeared, it could destroy his entire life, including his family and his business. He goes back to the police and shares his theory, but they do not believe him. Still, Thomas is not afraid of Adrian. He feels he has already lost everything, so he is willing to fight until the very end. He confronts Adrian directly, not as an investigator, but as a father speaking to another father, asking where Daniel is. Adrian continues to deny everything, claiming he knows nothing. Thomas can tell he is lying, but without proof, there is nothing he can do. Adrian has no intention of confessing, so he calls security to have Thomas removed. After that, the two of them never meet again. Back in the present, it becomes clear that there are two deaths connected to this story: Laura and Daniel. Virginia believes the two cases are linked, but for the police and the prosecutor, the only thing that matters is Laura's death, with Adrian as the main suspect. Until now, Adrian has claimed he has no idea who is trying to frame him, but now there is a possibility that Thomas and Elvira could be behind it, seeking revenge. A plan where Laura is killed and Adrian is framed as the murderer would be the perfect way to destroy him. Adrian then suggests another possibility. He claims there was someone else who knew about the accident, someone who happened to pass by that night. He believes this mysterious person may have returned, watched from a distance, and used the situation to blackmail him. He goes on to explain how he and Laura were lured to the hotel, the very place where Laura would later be killed. While at his office, Adrian received an envelope containing a photograph of a lake and an iPod. On the iPod, there was a distorted voice demanding 100,000 euros. The instructions were clear. At exactly 5 in the afternoon, Adrian had to go to a train station and wait for a call at a public phone. Naturally, he informed Laura, and the two of them went there together. Back in the present, Virginia points out that Adrian's story still has too many gaps. She questions how he could recognize the lake in the photo as the same place where he disposed of Daniel's body, especially since he went there at night. Adrian explains that before pushing the car into the water, he heard something in the forest. He says he only saw a deer, but then wonders if there might have been someone else watching. Adrian believes it could have been just a random passerby, but Virginia sees through this. To her, Adrian is trying to distance himself from Daniel's death. If the killer of Laura is the same person who blackmailed them, then it makes Adrian seem less responsible. Virginia is convinced that no judge would accept this version of events. She then presents 3 simple questions that Adrian cannot answer. Why was there a message on his phone? Why did the killer not take the money if that was the motive? And how did the killer enter and leave the locked hotel room without leaving any trace? Adrian has no answers, and his story begins to fall apart. Frustrated, he challenges Virginia to come up with a better explanation. Virginia has already thought it through. She begins with the moment Adrian and Laura were waiting at the train station. Since Laura is no longer alive, she cannot deny anything that is said about her. When the public phone rings, Laura answers it. She is instructed to go to a hotel that can only be reached by train, and the room has already been prepared for them. Before leaving, Laura is instructed to throw away her phone in a trash bin. After that, they take a train to a remote hotel located in a snowy mountain area. When they arrive, Laura tells Adrian to wait while she goes in first. She checks in, and it turns out the room has been booked under Adrian's name. Laura then heads to room 715 and enters alone. Once she feels it is safe, she calls Adrian to join her. But unknown to them, the killer is already inside the room. After waiting for 2 hours, Adrian receives a message from Laura's phone and realizes that everything is a trap. As they try to leave, the attacker strikes, knocking Adrian unconscious and killing Laura. According to Virginia's version of events, that killer is Thomas, Daniel's father. In her view, this explanation makes sense. Thomas has a clear motive: revenge. Framing Adrian for Laura's murder would destroy his life completely. Adrian had already paid millions in bail to avoid being detained. His lawyer lacked confidence in the case, which is why Virginia was brought in. The idea is simple. If Adrian can convince Virginia, then they can convince the judge. Virginia believes that the only way to prove Adrian is innocent in Laura's death is to shift the blame onto Thomas. But for that to work, Adrian must admit the truth about what he did to Daniel. Adrian thinks the story is convincing, but Virginia has not yet explained one crucial detail. How could Thomas enter and leave a locked hotel room without leaving any trace? To answer that, Virginia brings up a photo taken when Adrian was arrested. In the background, Elvira, Thomas's wife, can be seen. After leaving her career as a lecturer, Elvira now works at the hotel. In this version, Thomas is the one who lures Adrian to the hotel. The photo of the lake is simply a random image, chosen because the area where Daniel disappeared is full of lakes and swamps. Adrian would not be able to tell the difference between the real location and the one in the photo. Thomas arrives at the hotel before Laura and hides inside the room. The room itself is located right next to the housekeeping area where Elvira works. Elvira secretly opens a window in the housekeeping room and provides Thomas with a detachable window handle. Thomas then hides inside a closet, waiting. Earlier, he had instructed Laura to throw away her phone, and he retrieves it from the trash. Using Laura's phone, he sends messages to Adrian to maintain the illusion of the blackmailer. When the moment is right, he attacks Adrian and kills Laura. He deliberately leaves the money behind to frame Adrian, then returns Laura's phone and ensures that Adrian is connected to the murder weapon. To escape, Thomas uses the window handle provided by Elvira. He exits the room through the window, moves into the housekeeping area, and disappears. By the time the police arrive, he is already gone. Elvira then guides the officers to the room, acting as if nothing is wrong. While the police focus on arresting Adrian, she quietly locks the window again, erasing any trace of how Thomas escaped. Back in the present, Virginia receives a call and reveals that the witness set to testify is actually someone who happened to pass by during the accident. Time is running out. If Adrian wants to avoid being blamed for Daniel's death, they need to build a new narrative, one where Adrian was truly in Paris and the accident only involved Laura. In that version, Adrian's presence at the hotel would simply be because Laura asked for his help. But there is one major problem. How do they connect Daniel's body to Laura when only Adrian knows where it is? Virginia suggests planting one of Laura's belongings with Daniel's body, making it appear as if Laura was the one who hid it. To do that, they would need to place the evidence before the police find the car, which means Adrian has no choice but to reveal the exact location where he sank Daniel's vehicle. The story sounds convincing, but there is still an issue. There is a witness who clearly saw Adrian at the accident scene. Then Virginia admits something shocking. There is no such witness. She made it up because Adrian was not telling the truth from the beginning. Under pressure, Adrian finally marks the location where he disposed of Daniel.
¿Dónde los ocultó?
Fue aquí donde le sepulté.
But he has one more thing to confess. Before he pushed the car into the lake, Daniel was still alive. Adrian had already gone too far, and in his mind there was no turning back, so he chose to sink the car with Daniel still inside.
No se mienta más a sí mismo. Usted.
He explains this because if the body is ever found, an autopsy could reveal the truth and lead straight back to him. Hearing this, Virginia becomes furious. What began as an accident has now turned into undeniable murder. Everything changes again, and now they need an entirely new version of events. At this point, the real story finally comes to light. Adrian and Laura were working together, but not in the way Adrian had described before. After Daniel's death, Laura's mental state began to deteriorate. It was not Laura who took Daniel's wallet, it was Adrian. He even asked his lawyer to help create the illusion that Daniel had stolen money from the bank, and it was Adrian who made the fatal decision that sealed Daniel's fate. Laura wanted to call the police, but Adrian stopped her. According to her medical records, Laura had been suffering from frequent anxiety attacks. Watching the news about Daniel only made things worse until she could no longer handle the guilt. While Adrian continued moving forward and growing his business, Laura remained trapped in what they had done. She was the one who had looked directly into the eyes of Daniel's parents. She could not bring Daniel back, but she could still tell them the truth. It turns out that Laura was the one who arranged the meeting at the hotel. There was never any blackmailer. The entire story was something she created to lure Adrian there. She waited for him at the hotel and set up scheduled messages on his phone, just in case. She knew Adrian would never admit the truth on his own. So Adrian arrived at the hotel and went straight to Laura's room. There, Laura made it clear that she was going to confess everything. If she did, Adrian would be exposed as well. Laura planned to leave, but Adrian could not allow that to happen. Realizing he had no way out, he killed her. Afterward, he scattered the money near her body and injured himself to make it look like he had been attacked. Adrian then questions why Thomas and Elvira did not act if Laura had already told them the truth. Virginia explains that even if they knew, they had no proof. They did not know where Daniel's body was. Only Adrian knew that. And now Virginia knows too, because Adrian has just revealed it. Then Virginia asks Adrian to look out the window. Across the building, someone is watching them. When Adrian looks closer, he realizes it is Thomas. Having lost faith in the police long ago, Thomas has been conducting his own investigation, quietly and relentlessly searching for the truth. When Thomas and Elvira hear about Laura's death, everything starts to make sense to them. Thomas begins closely watching Adrian and his lawyer, which leads him to discover that Adrian has brought in Virginia for help. At one point, Adrian even tries to support his version of the story by pointing to a photo in a news article, claiming that Elvira was present when he was arrested. But Virginia quickly shuts that down. She explains that Elvira was not working that day. In fact, she and Thomas were at the hotel for a different reason, to meet Laura. She also points out that the photo has been altered, since Elvira does not appear in the mirror's reflection. At the same time, the 180-minute timer finally runs out. Virginia says she is going to step out for a short break, but that turns out to be a lie. Instead of leaving, she goes straight to meet Thomas. Back in the hotel room, Adrian notices that the pen Virginia gave him has started leaking in his pocket. When he checks it, he realizes it is actually a recording device. He then looks through the documents Virginia brought with her, only to discover that they are all blank. From the room, Adrian sees Virginia sitting together with Thomas. That is when the truth finally hits him. The woman he thought was Virginia reveals her real identity. She is Elvira. Once a member of a theater group, she is a skilled actress, which explains how she managed to play the role so convincingly. At that exact moment, the real Virginia finally arrives at the hotel. That is why Elvira gave Adrian exactly 180 minutes, just enough time before the real lawyer showed up. In that instant, Adrian understands everything. He has just confessed to both murders, Laura and Daniel, directly to Elvira and Thomas. And just like that, the story comes to an end. So the moral of the story is, if your life starts needing fake trips, fake thefts, fake lawyers, and a sinking car, maybe just stay home and follow the GPS.